Thank you so much. It was definitely worth flying in from Barcelona. And it's been really inspiring to learn all what you're doing. And also just the fact that we are able to be here all together trying to figure out which is the potential of these technologies. And in my case, I like to focus on the power of AR for creating impact. But very briefly about me, I am the founder of Garage Stories, which I started back in 2016 in Silicon Valley, in a garage. And basically, I come from the film industry, and I landed in Silicon Valley, and I was mind blown by these technologies. And it wasn't so much for what I saw, but for what I imagined, what I anticipated that could be done with these technologies. And essentially, the idea behind Garage Stories was really simple. It was the idea of creating a content lab in the shape of a playground. It was never meant to be a production company, rather this meeting point for people from the storytelling, the film world, and also developers, musicians, architects, psychologists, everyone who could come in and help build the language of these mediums. I was really focusing on the storytelling side of it and how when an emerging media appears, we don't really know how to craft stories because we don't understand the language, because it doesn't have a language. So the idea was to get all these people together to start building the language on how to tell stories. And initially, the idea was to create a physical space, a garage, where big tech companies will bring all their tech, and we will open the garage to the creative community to sort of come and play and start building ideas on how could we use that technologies and tell stories with them. But then we start receiving a lot of opportunities to actually organize labs all over. So we've been working mainly in North America, South America, and Europe. And here is just a few learnings that we had in the last 3 years that we've been running. First one, so what? Who cares? At the very beginning, we worked a lot with film festivals. That was the industry I was coming for. That was what I knew. And we were also focusing a lot in VR. Coming from film, it's a much more natural transition to an environment that's completely made up. And we did a lot of fun experiments. We mixed like the virtual pieces with real actors, creating sort of hybrid experiences. We also played with the perception of space and time, trying to see if we could actually mess up with you. We also tried to do like experiences for two people, trying to see if the characters in the real world could convince you to actually act in the real one, and many, many things. But at the end, what happened in the film festivals, it was really far apart. What was the traditional structure of a film festival with the immersive, innovative side of things. And at the end, what happened is that people who were interested in what we were doing was people that was already interested in these technologies. But really, people didn't really understand why should they care, because they couldn't understand the value of why are we trying this, where is the business model, how do I distribute that? So it was a huge disconnection. So at the time, we started saying that it was not enough of bringing people together. Actually asking the right question when we were posing the labs was really important. And it was simply, why? So going on to the next chapter, I don't really know how to name this one. But essentially, from the very beginning, we said that we were not about technology, that we were about content, about people. But it actually took us 2 years to intuitively understand what we meant when we were saying this. It is very easy to think that in VR, for example, just by the fact that the user is in the middle of the experience, that's a good user-centric design. But this is not necessarily the case. So it took us 2 years, as I said, to actually intuitively understand what we mean by saying this. Which brings me to chapter 3, which is about the power of a storytelling. So normally we're used to think as movies, storytelling, as entertainment, which means that is a way for me to unwind, to relax, to have this time of disconnection. But actually, stories are powerful. They have the power of destroying or reinforcing social standards. And then here, for example, at Disney example, they had done a really poor favor to us women. And also then I started looking into science fiction. And you can see all these movies, 1992 predicting driverless cars, Metropolis predicting androids, or Space Odyssey, tablets, City, and so on. But then I start thinking, were all these people visionaries? Or actually what happens is that when we're able to project in the collective imaginarium of people what the future could look like, and we manage to make it a collective vision, then we actually go and build it. Because one thing is for sure is that we cannot be what we can't imagine. And also, the future is defined not only by the stories we tell, but also by the stories we do not tell. Which brings me to chapter 4. Let's try this again. And here we decided that if we really wanted to continue this and bring in some real value, we had to change the question that we were posing to our labs. So instead of keep asking, how can we tell stories with emerging technology, we start asking ourselves, which stories should we tell? And then leverage the power of these technologies to actually achieve things, impact in the real world. And here is a recap of some of the projects that is what actually kept me going with this, and that to me are starting to answer some of the questions that I was asking myself at the very beginning. And for example, this is BitBooks. It's a project that came out of a lab in Guatemala, which basically was inspired with that game that kids have been playing for years. At least I was, like changing stickers and collecting things. So basically, BitBooks are the tiniest expression of a book. And with a tablet or a phone, a kid could augment a piece of a story related to the subject that's being treated at class. But what actually makes this project interesting to me is that each BitBook contains a different part of the story. So we're actually making the most of the fact that education is a social thing where kids can interact, and that adds value. And also, what we wanted to achieve also is that kids will perceive education as something valuable. And this project was actually presented at TEDx last year. Moving on. This probably is the most beautiful project that we've worked with. It came out of a lab we did at the Institute for the Future in San Francisco. And the project is called SIA, which basically came out because one of the participants of the winning team, he had a son with autism that at the age of 11, he was starting to react to cartoons, which normally you will do at 4. But he was starting just then to react to the cartoons he was saying. And SIA basically, what it proposes is augmented characters and stories that can adapt reality to the capacity of someone who might have cognitive disabilities. And very short demo video with the first MVP that we built. Actually, we received a lot of support from Magic Leap to build this first MVP. And this is Patton, the kid of the guy who worked in this. So basically, that's what he will be saying. This is this little character that, through mimic and also very simple messages, can actually help him deliver very simple tasks that he will normally be unable to, because he will be needing his father or his mother all the time with him, helping him. Another one, this came from a lab we did in New York. And in this one, we focus on climate action, as it was in September, which is the climate week in New York. And we had the leader of Fridays for Future opening the lab. And this project was inspired by her talk. And essentially, it proposes virtual avatars that can join demonstrations all over the world. It is not thought to replace real people being in that place, but is it thought to actually be able to show us our support to demonstrations and causes that geographically might be really far away from us. And essentially, you will have your avatar, which is unique, and it's linked to a blockchain login. And then you could send your avatar with your message to any demonstration that's been set up in the application, in the app. And then if you were actually in the physical space, you could see all the people from all over the world with their avatars showing support to that case. And this project, it was created in September, and they already have a working FEST MVP, which is going to be presented in April at the Global Festival of Action of the UN. Okay, yeah. And these other two last projects that I'm going to present, they came out of a lab that we did with the City Council of Barcelona in order to work with citizens to pose challenges of their city. And then we had other citizens who were the ones that signed up to participate in that lab to pose solutions to that challenges. This one was posed by the head of the cleaning services of the city, that he was explaining that in terms of recycling, the main problem was at the houses, where families were not really doing that properly, so it was too late once it will actually reach the factories. So this was a game that was thought to be played at family units, but the main drivers for this project to work are kids. So we're starting a test in March in a school to actually test how engaging this could be for them. And essentially you have this city in augmented reality where you can see the whole recycling process, but this looks like really boring. So essentially, in order to customize your city and play with it, you have to go to the containers of the city that have markers where you can get coins. And later on, you go back to the city where you can buy different elements to start customizing your city. And finally, this is the winning project of that lab that was actually posed by a citizen. Her name is Benita, and she's 80 years old. And she came along with her granddaughter, and she wanted to see how could we work on women empowerment through intergenerational dialogue. And after the reflection that in Barcelona there is 168 sculptures of men and 14 of women, what they come out was with the idea of creating holographic, real-size sculptures of local women who may not be worldwide known, but they have done a lot of things in their local context, and they have a lot to say. And we've been working with women like from all ages up to 80. Now they can pitch you what AR is. But essentially, technology is quite simple. There is many projects being done using volumetric captures of people. But to me, what's interesting about this project is that at the beginning, it was really hard to convince the first women to join the project because their humbleness, in a way, was resistance. They thought they had nothing interesting to tell. They thought that they had nothing interesting to bring into the table. So it was really, really hard to get the first ones on board. But once we managed to get the two first ones, then they went and told their friends, and then we had 12. And from that 12, we had 50. And right now, we have too many women that we cannot put for the first test that we're launching in May. And so out of this, on the last year, we've started this new series of events, Stories for Future, which the aim is to actually work on projects with these technologies that can actually help us transition to the future that we want. And answering to my own question, and this is just my opinion, I think the potential of AR to build better futures, and this is the best picture that I found to illustrate, is if these technologies can become bridges from where we are and where we want to be. And if these digital elements that we place in the real world can actually become catalyzers of action. So let's set AR in action. Thank you very much.